Have you ever bought a Subway tuna sandwich and wondered why it doesn't taste of anything? Or eaten a Pret baguette which claims it's freshly made, to later find out it was actually baked in France? Today we're naming the 7 biggest UK restaurant chains to avoid at all costs, including the chain that's killed 2 of its customers. Starting with Wetherspoons. Walk into one and you'll see a menu promising fresh, hot food at prices that look impossible. They are. Here's how the kitchen actually works. The curry arrives at the back of the pub, frozen in a plastic bag. Staff microwave it for 2 to 3 minutes. The rice gets 2 minutes. The pasta is microwaved. The poached eggs arrive pre-poached in plastic pouches and get reheated. The bacon is cooked elsewhere and warmed on a grill long enough to develop char marks. The staff have a name for the microwave. They call it Chef Mike, because Chef Mike makes most of what you eat. Larger pubs run 2 to 6 microwave operators on a busy lunchtime. That isn't a kitchen, it's an assembly line. The steaks deserve their own paragraph. Wetherspoons sells around 200,000 of them a week across 900 pubs, with approximately 90,000 going out on Tuesday Steak Club alone. For years, those steaks were supplied by Russell Hume, a meat processor that the Food Standards Agency found to have been systematically relabeling use-by dates across several of its production facilities. The non-compliance, in the FSA's words, was systemic and widespread. The company collapsed. 302 jobs were lost. Wetherspoons had to pull 200,000 steaks a week from menus until a new supplier was lined up. A former Wetherspoons chef with 5 years at the company told a journalist that the steaks always looked awful and that he had never eaten one himself. When the people cooking your food won't eat it, you can take that as data. The hygiene record is its own thing. The Bellhanger pub in Chepstow held a 5 out of 5 food hygiene rating until weeks before an ex-employee posted footage showing mouldy food, dirty microwaves and stacks of unwashed dishes in the kitchen. The Furness Railway pub in Barrow-in-Furness shut entirely after hundreds of customers were violently ill within 48 hours of eating there. Wetherspoons closed the pub and hotel and required a professional deep clean before reopening. Both locations held high hygiene ratings within weeks of these incidents. 98% of Wetherspoons sites hold 5-star ratings. That fact is meant to reassure you. It shouldn't. It just tells you the rating system is measuring something other than whether your lunch is safe. Number 2. Nando's. There are 2 separate stories here, and they implicate Nando's in different ways. The first is the case of Gary Jones, a night shift worker at Harvey and Brockless, a fine food supplier to Nando's, the Ivy, and other major chains. Over the course of 1 month, CCTV captured Jones alone in the storage area, inserting rubber gloves, plastic bags, and metal ring pulls into hummus tubs. He poured fish sauce into dressings that weren't supposed to contain fish. He mixed sesame and chili into products that shouldn't contain either, creating allergen risks for any customer with the relevant allergy. He mixed an unidentified substance into raw ingredients destined for next-day production. The only reason no customer was harmed is that the metal detectors at the end of the production line caught the ring pulls, which prompted an investigation into the rest. 24 hummus tubs and several dressing batches, all destined for Nando's restaurants, were withdrawn. Jones was sentenced to 42 months. That's the kind of incident a brand can argue isn't its fault. The second story is harder to argue away. Investigators released undercover footage from Cambria Farm in Somerset, a Facenda Group farm holding more than 150,000 birds and supplying Nando's. Hundreds of chicks were dying every day across several days. Bins outside the sheds were filled with tiny bodies, still in yellow baby feathers. Birds suffered from such severe lameness that they couldn't stand or reach water. Many had raw, ammonia-burnt skin from sitting in their own litter because they were in too much pain to walk. By the final visit, the sheds were so crowded the investigators struggled to walk through them. Workers were filmed kicking birds during checks and breaking the necks of birds that were still alive and flapping their wings. One worker dumped a live chick into a wheelbarrow of dead bodies, walked off, and came back an hour later to kill it. The farm held Red Tractor certification at the time. It continued supplying Nando's after the investigation. 3 further Facenda farms were investigated. Conditions were comparable. Nando's response in full was that the company was disappointed with the footage. No public change to sourcing followed. Whatever you think of the chicken on your plate, the company that put it there does not appear to have lost much sleep over how it got there. Number 3. KFC. The story most people remember about KFC UK is the chicken shortage. In early 2018, KFC switched its UK logistics contract from Bidvest, which operated 6 warehouses, to DHL, which operated 1 warehouse in Rugby. Within 4 days, around 604 of the chain's 870 UK stores had closed because they had no chicken. The Rugby depot wasn't properly registered with local authorities to store chilled food when operations began. Shipments spoiled while drivers waited for entry. Same-store sales dropped around 6.8%. Full-year profit fell 27.8%. KFC then ran the FCK apology, an empty chicken bucket with the letters rearranged, and won marketing awards for the response. What the campaign did not mention is that KFC had chosen the cheapest logistics bid from a supplier with no fresh food experience, terminated the previous supplier overnight with no transition period, and engineered the disaster through cost-cutting. The viral apology was a victory lap for the same decision that caused the crisis. The individual locations have their own record. At the Leytonstone KFC in East London, environmental health officers found obvious signs of rodent infestation throughout the premises. Droppings in food storage and preparation areas, gnawed bags of breading flour in the storeroom, a large rat hole in the floor, and an open drain in the rear yard. The restaurant was closed immediately due to an imminent risk to public health. The franchisee, Triple D Limited, was fined a combined £24,784. The Bicester KFC in Oxfordshire was prosecuted separately for cockroach infestation, dead flies and filthy conditions, with total fines and costs of £37,395. Employee testimony fills in the rest of the picture. Former staff have described colleagues not wearing gloves, dishes being sprayed rather than washed, and staff smoking weed by the storage and the sink during shifts. None of which is supported by KFC's training material, all of which has been said by enough former staff in enough locations to be at minimum widespread. Number 4. Greggs. Greggs' marketing rests on the phrase freshly baked. This is technically true. It is also, in the way most customers would understand the phrase, false. Every savoury pastry sold in a Greggs sausage rolls, steak bakes, chicken bakes, cheese and onion bakes arrives in the shop frozen from one of 9 regional bakeries that manufacture and freeze them centrally. Shop staff bake them from frozen on-site, in small batches throughout the day. The official Greggs FAQ confirms this. The freshness, in other words, is the freshness of a frozen product brought up to temperature in a small commercial oven, not the freshness of something made in the back. The bigger trick is what happens after the pastry comes out of the oven. The display counters at Greggs are not heated. They are lit with warm-coloured bulbs, but the lighting is for display, not for temperature. There is a precise reason for this. In the UK, hot food carries 20% VAT. Cold food does not. By keeping the display counters unheated, Greggs keeps its products in the cold food tax category. The pastries come out of the oven, sit under the lights, and cool to room temperature while they wait for a customer. Which is the explanation for the universal Greggs complaint that the sausage roll is rarely actually hot. It isn't supposed to be. Heating it would cost 20% of the margin. The same product is now sold in Iceland and Tesco as a frozen range. A pack of Greggs sausage rolls from the Iceland freezer is, ingredient for ingredient, the same pastry being baked in the shop. The customer is just doing the reheating at home. In January 2025, the Food Standards Agency issued an urgent allergy alert because a batch of 2-pack Greggs steak bakes sold at Iceland had been packed instead with sausage, bean, and cheese melts containing undeclared sulfites, a respiratory and allergic risk for asthmatics. Nobody knows how many incorrectly packed packs reached customers before the recall. The marketing says freshly baked. The supply chain says 9 regional factories, central freezing, point-of-sale reheat, and tax-coded display lighting. They are not the same thing. Number 5. Subway. The tuna question is the one that broke nationally. In 2021, the New York Times commissioned a lab to test sandwich material from 3 Subway locations. More than 60 inches of Subway tuna was tested. No amplifiable tuna DNA was found. Subway's response was that the cooking process denatures tuna DNA, which makes the test unreliable, and the company set up a website, subwaytunafacts.com, to make this argument at length. A separate test by Inside Edition did detect tuna. Then a UCLA lab, the Barber Lab, ran a larger set, 20 samples from 20 different locations. 19 of the 20 showed no detectable tuna DNA. All 20 showed chicken DNA, 11 showed pork, 7 showed cattle. The result is that nobody is quite certain what is in a Subway tuna sandwich, including, possibly, Subway. In 2020, the Irish Supreme Court ruled that Subway's bread is not legally bread. Irish food law caps sugar in bread at 2% of flour weight. Subway's bread contains roughly 10%. The court reclassified it as confectionery or fancy baked goods, which carried VAT consequences for Subway in Ireland, but, more interestingly, told the rest of the public what the sandwich is built on. 5 times the legal sugar definition. The expiration date practice is the most consistent thing across UK Subway employee testimony. Reddit and TikTok posts going back years describe managers replacing date stickers on spoiled product. One employee filmed the process. Another described picking the moldy bits off tomatoes and recutting them. Others have described chicken teriyaki being kept 4 days past its safe disposal date by relabeling, tuna being mixed into older tuna with a fresh date sticker on top, and a frozen bread batch that had been in storage so long the yeast had died and the bread wouldn't rise. None of this is corporate policy. It is also testimony from enough independent former employees in enough different locations to suggest the corporate policy isn't being enforced. The Enfield Town Subway was prosecuted after inspectors found mouse droppings throughout the premises, a live mouse stuck to a glue trap in the storage cupboard, drain flies and rat droppings in a box of caramel sauce. Total fines and costs came to £20,928. A Subway in Plymouth was caught displaying a 4-star FSA rating on its window when its actual current rating was 1. The Brownhill Subway became briefly internationally famous when an employee was filmed stuffing lettuce up his nose, blowing it back into the customer container, and spitting into the serving tray. He was charged with contaminating food with intent. The point isn't that one employee did one terrible thing. The point is that he did it on shift, on camera, while wearing a Subway uniform. Number 6. McDonald's. The Leytonstone McDonald's prosecution produced the largest single fine in the history of UK fast food enforcement, £475,000 with another £22,000 in costs. The case began with a customer finding mouse droppings inside the wrapper of a cheeseburger. Environmental health officers then documented the rest. Decomposing mouse remains throughout the outlet. Droppings on the floor of the food preparation area, droppings in the main cooking section, droppings next to a tray of cooking utensils, droppings in the hot holding area, and mouse droppings in a box containing caramel drizzle drink sauce. The pest control contract was being run by Ecolab on a twice-monthly inspection schedule. Whatever Ecolab were inspecting, it was not the things environmental health officers found, including a mummified mouse on top of a fryer that had somehow been missed during a visit just weeks before closure. The store was closed for 10 days. The presiding judge described the infestation as a failing on a local level and noted that McDonald's otherwise holds a good food safety record, which is a polite way of saying that a brand of this size has no excuse for letting it get this far. The harassment data sits separately. A recent investigation into UK McDonald's stores found more than 100 current and former workers who reported harassment, bullying, or sexual assault on the job. The company received over 400 internal complaints in a 5-month period, sometimes 2 a week. McDonald's UK employs around 170,000 people across 1,450 restaurants, so the absolute number is in keeping with the scale, but the rate at which complaints were being filed is not. Then there are the ice cream machines. McDonald's uses Taylor Company machines, which are notoriously complex and have automatic lockouts that prevent the machine from operating if a cleaning cycle isn't completed. Only Taylor-certified technicians can repair them, which is a long-running source of operator frustration. The frustration has produced a workaround. Maintenance staff install pieces of metal or plastic, known in the trade as jumpers, that bypass the cleaning lockout. Taylor Company itself has classified jumper installation as a very serious issue, warning that it can greatly increase the risk of serving unsafe products to the public. The machine still serves ice cream. It just isn't being cleaned. A former employee described the result as weird white alive things in the machine with the ice cream, which is not standard ingredient terminology. McDonald's, to its credit, publishes detailed beef sourcing, 100% British and Irish, no trimmings, no mechanically separated meat, no binders, no fillers. It declines to publish the same information about its chicken supply, despite repeated journalist inquiries. You can read whatever you want into a brand that is willing to be transparent about half its protein. Number 7. Pret A Manger. In 2016, a 15-year-old called Natasha Ednan Laperouse bought an artichoke, olive and tapenade baguette at the Pret in Heathrow Terminal 5 before boarding a flight to Nice. There was no allergen information on the packaging. There was general signage on the display fridge. 30 minutes after takeoff, Natasha's throat became itchy. Hives broke out across her body. Her breathing became labored. Her father administered 2 EpiPens. A doctor on the plane gave additional epinephrine. None of it worked. Natasha went into cardiac arrest and was pronounced dead at a hospital in Nice. The baguette had contained sesame seeds baked into the dough. In the year before Natasha's death, Pret had received 9 separate sesame-related allergy complaints. 6 of them involved the same artisan baguette range. 4 customers had been hospitalized. 1 had nearly died from anaphylactic shock, and her family had directly written to Pret to warn that another serious incident could easily occur. Pret made no labeling changes. The coroner at Natasha's inquest described Pret's labeling as inadequate and stated that the company was evading the spirit of the legislation. No criminal charges were filed because, technically, Pret was compliant with the law as written. The law as written was the problem. 2 years later, a 42-year-old dental nurse called Celia Marsh, mother of 5, bought a Pret Super Veg Rainbow Flatbread in Bath. It was marketed as vegan and dairy-free. Within 15 minutes of taking her first bite, Celia collapsed in the street. Less than 2 hours later, she was dead. The investigation found that the flatbread had contained coconut yogurt manufactured by a company called Planet Coconut. The yogurt had been made with a stabilizer that was cross-contaminated with dairy during production. Planet Coconut's own internal documents had flagged the cross-contamination risk. They had not passed that information to Pret, and they had not tested batches to verify the dairy-free claim on the label. Celia's daughter said publicly that her mother's death was entirely avoidable, and that if Planet Coconut had passed on the warnings in their possession, Celia would still be alive today. The 2 deaths produced Natasha's Law, which now requires full allergen labeling on all pre-packed on-site foods sold in the UK. The law is named after a 15-year-old girl who died because the chain that fed her did not consider it commercially necessary to print the ingredients on the packaging. Pret has continued operating. Former employees have described the supply chain that the marketing tends to obscure. Pret's baguettes are baked in a factory in France, frozen, shipped to UK stores and rebaked locally, a practice that ex-staff have referred to as loaf tanning salons, which is not the company's phrase. Soups arrive in sealed plastic bags and are reheated in water baths. Multiple former employees have stated that soups are often reheated 3 or 4 times before being thrown away, which contradicts the chain's own safety protocols and the freshness positioning of the brand. Since 2020, sandwiches now carry use-by dates and are routinely held over to the next day. The marketing still says freshly made. The supply chain says something else. Here's the broader picture. The Food Standards Agency currently lists 100,884 UK food premises as overdue for safety inspection. In Scotland, 20% of food safety officer roles sit vacant. National inspection sampling has dropped 79% in recent years. There are 5 public analyst laboratories left in the country, down from 9. Food crime is estimated to cost the UK economy £2 billion a year. 16 prosecutions reach court annually against more than 600 suspected cases. The 7 chains in this video aren't unusual within that environment. They are what happens when the regulatory ceiling gets lower. There isn't a list of safe chains to recommend in their place because the same supply chain pressures and the same understaffed inspection regime apply to all of them. There are instead 3 things that travel. Check the actual FSA hygiene rating before you go in, on the FSA register, not the sticker in the window. The sticker can be out of date or, in Plymouth, fraudulent. The register is current. Treat freshly made as a meaningless phrase until the chain explains what it means. Most of the offenders in this video pass the legal definition of fresh while still being microwave reheated, factory bagged, or relabeled. The legal definition is not the everyday definition, when you can eat at independence. The economics are different. An independent operator usually has the chef on site, eats their own food, lives or dies on word of mouth, and can't shift blame to a regional bakery or a rugby depot, none of which is a guarantee of safety. All of which is a different ratio of incentives. One last thing. Restaurants are one industry, But what about coffee chains, food delivery apps, supermarket brands? The same investigation runs through every place you buy food. Subscribe and we'll name them too. The chains aren't going to tell you what's in your food. We will.